He was taught that love is a transaction and smiles are weapons. She was the one person whose warmth was genuine, a beacon in his gilded cage. Their worlds collided in a storm of prejudice and passion, a forbidden connection that threatened to shatter his empire. But just as he began to trust the light she offered, a shadow from his past emerged, whispering a terrifying truth. Loving her could get her killed. The Zenith Hotel wasn't just a building. It was a monument of glass and steel, a symbol of impossible aspiration. For Nora Bennett, its shimmering spire was the North Star. Every morning, she donned her impeccable Navy uniform, polished her name tag, and stepped into the hushed, marble-cool world of five-star luxury. Her smile, wide and genuine, was her greatest asset. It wasn't for tips or favor. It was the sun around which her humble world orbited. She remembered the names of regular guests, calmed frantic travelers, and found joy in the flawless execution of a perfect service. This job was her dream, a hard-won foothold in a world she admired. Tai Woon had entered the hotel not as a dreamer, but as its reluctant master. Dressed in a tailored black suit that cost more than most cars, he was a storm cloud in the serene lobby. His gaze, cold and assessing, swept over the staff like a hawk scanning for weakness. He saw the forced grins, the subtle sycophancy, the hidden desperation. He trusted none of it. His father's command echoed in his mind, "Learn the business from the ground up. Prove you are not the emotional boy your mother made you." The words were a lash. His mother's disappearance was a wound he carried silently, a mystery that had frozen his heart. Their first meeting was a collision of planets. A VIP guest, a notoriously difficult tech mogul, was berating a young concierge, his voice a venomous hiss. Nora, witnessing the scene, smoothly intervened. "Mr. Alistair," she said, her voice a calm melody. "Your penthouse suite is ready, and we've taken the liberty of stocking the bar with your preferred single malt. Please, allow me to personally escort you and ensure everything is to your absolute satisfaction." Her smile was disarming, her efficiency flawless. The guest was pacified. But Tai Woon, watching from a shadowed alcove, saw only a performance. He saw a low-level employee deftly handling a powerful man and assumed it was calculated ambition. As Nora passed, he stepped into her path, his voice a low, icy blade. "An impressive display," he stated, his eyes devoid of warmth. "How long did you practice that simpering act to manipulate a guest?" Nora's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened, flashing with a fire that surprised him. "It's called hospitality, sir. Perhaps you're unfamiliar with the concept." She didn't wait for a dismissal. She simply inclined her head and walked away, her spine straight, leaving the billionaire heir stunned into silence by the sheer audacity of a waitress who dared to look at him not with fear, but with defiance. He had come to observe the hotel. But now, he found his eyes tracking one specific, infuriatingly cheerful employee, a single question burning in his mind. Who was she, really? And as he watched her laugh genuinely with an elderly couple, a strange, forgotten feeling stirred in his chest, a dangerous, thrilling spark of curiosity. The following week was a silent war of observation. Tai Woon, under the guise of his managerial training, found his eyes perpetually drawn to Nora. He watched her during the morning briefings, her attentive nod as the head of service spoke. He saw her in the dining hall, effortlessly calming a child's tantrum while the parents looked on in gratitude. Each genuine laugh, each unprompted act of kindness was a crack in the fortress of his cynicism. It annoyed him. She didn't fit the pattern. She was an anomaly his cold logic couldn't process. Nora, for her part, did her best to ignore the brooding air whose presence cast a chill over the entire staff floor. She'd heard the whispers, the Han air, scrutinizing everything. Someone's going to get fired. She resolved to be more impeccable than ever. But his gaze was a physical weight, a pair of dark, intense eyes that followed her, making the back of her neck prickle. He was a puzzle, a brutally handsome one, she reluctantly admitted, wrapped in arrogance and what looked like profound loneliness. Their second clash was more personal. A sudden, torrential downpour had caught Seoul by surprise at the end of the shift. Nora, without an umbrella, stood under the hotel's grand portico, calculating the mad dash to the bus stop. Tai Woon emerged from the lobby, his driver pulling up with a silent, sleek black sedan. He paused beside her, the scent of rain and his subtle, expensive cologne filling the air. "Your unparalleled hospitality doesn't extend to checking the weather forecast," he remarked, his tone dry. Nora kept her eyes on the pouring sheets of water. "My hospitality is reserved for guests, sir. Not for critics who offer no constructive feedback, only judgment." A flicker of something, irritation, perhaps amusement, crossed his stoic face. Just then, a gust of wind blew a spray of cold rain directly onto them. Nora shivered involuntarily, hugging her thin jacket closer. Tai Woon's hand tightened on his leather briefcase. An internal battle raged. Every instinct, born of a lifetime of isolation and mistrust, screamed at him to get in the car and leave. But another part, a part he thought long dead, recoiled at the sight of her shivering. It was an impulse of basic human decency, so foreign it felt painful. Without a word, he shrugged off his impeccably tailored wool overcoat. It was an absurdly expensive, intimate gesture. He didn't look at her as he held it out. "Take it. You'll catch a cold, and your efficiency will drop," he said, his voice gruff, as if accusing her of a fault. Nora stared at the offered coat, then at him, utterly bewildered. This wasn't the cold-hearted heir she'd met. This was confusing. "I couldn't." "Consider it a corporate asset protection measure," he interrupted, his jaw tight. He thrust the coat into her hands, his fingers brushing against hers for a fleeting second. A jolt, sharp and electric, passed between them at the touch. Both froze. His dark eyes snapped to hers, wide with a shock that mirrored her own. The air crackled, the sound of the rain fading into a dull roar. In that single, charged moment, the professional animosity shattered, revealing something raw and undeniable beneath. Tai Woon pulled his hand back as if burned. Without another word, he turned and slid into the waiting car, leaving Nora standing alone under the portico, clutching his incredibly warm, fragrant coat, her heart hammering against her ribs. She watched the taillights disappear into the rainy night, the ghost of his touch still tingling on her skin. Inside the car, Tai Woon stared unseeingly at the rain-streaked window, his mind reeling. He had touched her hand, and for the first time in a decade, he hadn't felt nothing. He had felt everything. And it terrified him. What had he just started? The morning after the rainstorm, the coat lay folded in Nora's locker, a silent monument to the bewildering encounter. Its weight felt immense, carrying the scent of sandalwood and power. She had washed and pressed it, every touch of the fabric a reminder of that electric jolt. Delivering it back felt like a confrontation she wasn't ready for. Tai Woon, meanwhile, had spent a sleepless night. The memory of Nora's wide, shocked eyes and the startling warmth of her skin played on a loop, disrupting the cold order of his mind. He arrived at the hotel earlier than usual, his demeanor, if possible, even more forbidding. He needed to reassert control over the situation and over himself. Fate, or perhaps the meticulous scheduling of the hotel's event manager, provided the stage. The Zenith was hosting an ultra-exclusive, high-stakes shareholders' luncheon. The pressure was immense, the margin for error zero. Tai Woon's father and sister, Seo Yun, would be in attendance, watching his every move. Nora was assigned to the event, a testament to her skill. She moved through the ballroom with a dancer's grace, her smile serene, her hand steady as she poured champagne and presented delicate canapés. Tai Woon observed her from the head table, a silent, brooding sentinel. His sister, Seo Yun, elegant and sharp as a scalpel, followed his gaze. "The help seems competent," Seo Yun murmured, her voice a silken threat. "Quite pretty, too. Distractingly so. Is that why you're so focused, little brother?" Tai Woon didn't grace her with a response, but his knuckles whitened around his water glass. The crisis came from an unexpected quarter. One of the oldest, most respected board members, Chairman Park, suddenly choked, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. Panic rippled through the elite crowd. Staff froze, unsure how to handle such a visceral emergency amidst such opulence. But Nora didn't freeze. She moved with swift, decisive purpose. She gently but firmly guided the choking man from his chair, executed the Heimlich maneuver with trained precision, and dislodged the piece of food. The sound of his gasping, grateful breath was the loudest thing in the suddenly silent hall. As the chairman recovered, clutching his chest, he looked at Nora, his eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you, my dear," he wheezed, his voice full of genuine emotion. "You saved my life." Nora simply smiled, a gentle, reassuring curve of her lips. "I'm just glad you're all right, sir. Can I get you some water?" It was in that moment Tai Woon saw it with devastating clarity. This was no act. This was her character, her very essence. She hadn't looked for praise or reward. Her only concern was for the well-being of another human being. In a room full of people who saw Chairman Park as an asset, she had seen a person in peril. Later, as the event wound down, Tai Woon found her in a quiet corridor, restocking a service cart. The usual barbs and cold remarks died in his throat. "What you did in there," he began, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Nora turned, her expression guarded. "It's standard first aid training, sir. All staff are certified." "No," he said, taking a step closer, forcing her to look up at him. The air grew thick. "That wasn't training. That was you." He searched her face, truly seeing her for the first time. The strength in her gentle eyes, the integrity in her posture. "Your smile, it's real, isn't it?" Nora held his gaze, her heart thundering. The confession felt like a surrender from him. "Not always," she admitted softly, "but it is when I mean it." The revelation hung between them, fragile and profound. Tai Woon was on the precipice of saying something more, something dangerous, when his sister's voice cut through the tension from the end of the hall. "Tai Woon, the board is waiting. Stop fraternizing with the staff and remember your position." The spell was broken. The heir's mask slid back into place, but his eyes, as they met Nora's one last time, held a new, tumultuous conflict. He had seen her truth, and it had dismantled his entire worldview. But as he walked away to join the wolves of the boardroom, Nora was left with a chilling realization. His world was full of enemies, and she had just become a target. He has seen her heart, and she has seen the cage he lives in. The attraction is now undeniable, but the dangers are crystallizing. His sister is watching, and the walls of hierarchy are closing in. How will they navigate this new, treacherous territory? The days following the shareholders' luncheon were a study in charged silence. A new, unspoken understanding existed between Tai Woon and Nora, communicated in fleeting glances across the lobby and the slight, almost imperceptible softening of his brow when she passed. He no longer watched her with cold suspicion, but with a deep, contemplative intensity that made her breath catch. The hotel was a machine, and Nora was one of its most reliable cogs. But the machine was beginning to show its ruthless gears. Seo-Yun Han, a viper in a designer dress, had taken notice. She began making routine inspections, her criticism of the staff, and Nora in particular, becoming pointed and public. "Is this the standard we aspire to?" she'd ask loudly, tracing a gloved finger over a spotless surface near Nora. "Perhaps we need to reevaluate our hiring practices." Nora felt the noose tightening. She loved her job, but the dream was now tainted with a low thrum of anxiety. One evening, as she wearily changed out of her uniform, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. The message was simple, yet it sent a jolt of ice through her veins. "Unknown number, Miss Bennett. Your mother's medical bills at Seoul National University Hospital are quite substantial for a waitress. We can discuss financial assistance. Meet me at the Sky Terrace Bar. 8 p.m. Come alone." Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. How did they know? Her mother's illness was her most guarded secret, the engine of her relentless work ethic. This wasn't an offer. It was a demonstration of power. It was a threat. At 8 p.m., Nora stood at the entrance to the Sky Terrace, the hotel's exclusive rooftop bar. The city glittered below like a bed of stolen diamonds, a world of wealth that felt alien and hostile. Seo-Yun Han sat at a secluded table, 2 glasses of champagne already poured. She looked like a queen holding court. "Sit," Seo-Yun commanded, "not a request. I'll be brief. You have a certain charm. I see my brother is taken with it. It's a novelty, one that will pass." Nora remained standing. "With all due respect, Ms. Han, My family's finances are not a topic for discussion. Seo-yun's smile was a razor blade. Everything is a topic for discussion when it involves the Han family. My brother is weak, sentimental. Our father believes hardening him here will prepare him to lead. A distraction like you could ruin years of planning. She slid a plain white envelope across the table. This is twice your annual salary. Take it. Resign. Relocate. Your mother will receive the best care, anonymously. The moral dilemma was a physical weight on Nora's shoulders. The money was a solution to every practical problem she had. It was security for her mother. But it was blood money. It meant admitting she was a thing to be bought off, that her dreams, her integrity, had a price. I don't want your money, Nora said, her voice quiet but steady, laced with a steel Seo-yun hadn't anticipated. Then what do you want? Seo-yun hissed, her composure cracking. Him? Do you truly believe you can stand beside him? The world will eat you alive. Before Nora could answer, a low, furious voice cut through the night. What is the meaning of this? Tae-woon stood at the terrace entrance, his figure silhouetted against the city lights. He had been looking for his sister on a business matter and had stumbled upon the scene. His eyes, burning with a dark fire, moved from his sister's triumphant smirk to Nora's pale, resolute face, and finally to the unopened envelope on the table. He understood instantly. Seo-yun recovered first. We were just having a chat, little brother. About career paths. Tae-woon ignored her. He walked directly to Nora, his presence a shield. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low, meant only for her. Nora could only nod, overwhelmed by his intervention and the raw concern in his eyes. He turned his gaze back to his sister, and the temperature on the terrace seemed to drop 10 degrees. You will not approach her again, he stated, each word a shard of ice. You will not speak to her. You will not even look at her. Do you understand? Seo-yun's smile was gone, replaced by a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. The battle lines were now drawn, not in the boardroom, but over a waitress. Tae-woon had openly chosen a side. Without another word, he took Nora's elbow, his touch firm yet gentle, and guided her away from his sister, away from the envelope, away from the glittering, predatory city. But as they stepped back into the bright, sterile light of the hotel corridor, Nora knew one thing with terrifying certainty. The war for Tae-woon's soul had just begun, and she was now standing at its very center, completely unarmed. He has publicly defended her, making her the undeniable focal point of his family's conflict. The threat is no longer veiled. It's a declared war. But in the wake of this confrontation, a new, more intimate danger emerges. The undeniable pull between them. How long can they resist the attraction that now burns in the open? The elevator descended from the sky terrace in a silence so thick it felt like a physical presence. Nora stood rigidly in the corner, the scent of Tae-woon's cologne and the lingering chill from his confrontation with his sister making her head spin. He had not released her elbow, his grip a brand of both possession and protection. When the doors opened to an empty executive floor, he finally spoke, his voice rough. My office. Now. It wasn't a request. He led her down a plush, silent corridor and into a space that was a reflection of him. Vast, minimalist, and coldly beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Seoul's skyline, but tonight it looked like a battlefield of lights. He closed the door, the soft click echoing like a gunshot. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. How did she know about your mother? Nora wrapped her arms around herself, the professional barrier between them shattered. I don't know. I've never told anyone here. She has people who dig, he said, his voice low and dangerous. She finds weaknesses and exploits them. He paced away from her, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a rare sign of agitation. That envelope, you should have taken it. The statement shocked her. What? He turned, his eyes blazing. It would have been safer. If you had taken it and left, she would have considered the matter closed. But you didn't. You stood there and defied her. Now she sees you as a threat, not just an inconvenience. His words were harsh, but the emotion behind them wasn't anger at her. It was fear. Nora saw it then, the raw, unvarnished terror in his eyes. The unflappable heir was terrified. "And what would you have done if I had taken it?" she whispered, taking a tentative step forward. "Would you have let me go?" The question hung between them, stripping away all pretense. Tai Woon's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The air crackled, charged with all the unsaid words, all the stolen glances, all the electric touches. "No," he breathed, the word a raw confession. "I would have found you. I would have brought you back." It was the final surrender. In that moment, the last of his walls crumbled. He closed the distance between them, his hand coming up to cradle her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek with a reverence that stole her breath. "Nora," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a storm, a desperate, hungry, years-in-the-making collision of two lonely souls. It was all the frustration, the longing, the fear, and the hope poured into a single, searing connection. Nora's hands came up to clutch the lapels of his jacket, holding on as the world tilted on its axis. For the first time, the cold billionaire heir felt truly, completely warm. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, they rested their foreheads together. The city lights blurred outside. "I'm not going anywhere," Nora whispered, her voice firm. A ghost of a smile, a real one, touched Tai Woon's lips. "I know." But as he leaned in to kiss her again, his personal phone vibrated on the desk, lighting up with a notification. The preview of the email was visible. Subject: urgent. Discrepancy found. Staff financials. First line: preliminary audit of employee Nora Bennett reveals suspicious deposits into her mother's medical fund, traced to an offshore account linked to. Tai Woon's blood ran cold. He pulled back, his face a mask of horror. He looked from the phone to Nora's trusting, flushed face. Seo Yun hadn't just threatened her. She had already begun to frame her. The kiss has sealed their fate, but a new, more insidious trap has already been sprung. He holds her in his arms, but on his screen is the evidence that could destroy her. How can he protect her from a lie that has already been planted? The warmth of the kiss evaporated, replaced by an arctic chill. Tai Woon's body went rigid. He pulled back from Nora, his eyes darting from her beautifully bewildered face to the damning glow of his phone screen. "What is it?" Nora asked, her voice soft with concern, her hand still resting lightly on his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. He couldn't speak. He could only turn the screen toward her. Nora's eyes scanned the words. Suspicious deposits, offshore account. The color drained from her face, her hand falling away from him as if burned. What is this? This isn't true." "I know," Tai Woon said, his voice a low, furious growl. The certainty in his tone was absolute. It was the first time anyone had ever believed in her without question, without a shred of doubt, and it was more powerful than any kiss. "This is my sister's work. She's not just trying to scare you away. She's building a case to have you fired for gross misconduct, or worse, criminally charged." The romantic bubble they had momentarily inhabited shattered, replaced by the brutal reality of corporate warfare. Nora stumbled back, her legs hitting the edge of his sleek desk. "But why? Because I won't take her money? Because we..." She couldn't finish the sentence, the weight of it all crashing down on her. "Because you are a vulnerability she can exploit to weaken me," he stated, his mind already racing, calculating moves and countermoves like a grandmaster in a deadly game. He saw the panic in her eyes, the fear of not just losing her job, but her reputation, her freedom. He moved to her, not to kiss her again, but to steady her. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his touch firm and grounding. "Listen to me. You will not face this alone. I will handle it." "How?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "She has proof, even if it's fake." "She has the appearance of proof," he corrected, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. "And I have the power to dismantle appearances. But you must trust me, and you must do exactly as I say." For the first time, the power imbalance between them wasn't a source of tension. It was a weapon, and he was placing the hilt in her hand. He was asking for her absolute trust. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "First, you will go home. Act normal. Do not speak to anyone about this. Second, he paused, his gaze intense. Tomorrow, you will formally report to HR that you are being harassed by a senior executive. Nora's eyes widened. Report Seo Yun Han? They'll never believe me. They'll fire me on the spot. A grim, determined smile touched his lips. No. They will open an investigation. Because your report will be filed concurrently with my own, alleging that my sister is creating a hostile work environment and fabricating evidence to sabotage my leadership training. It will be a stalemate. A public, messy stalemate that our father despises. He was going to escalate. He was going to take a private war and drag it into the corporate light, risking his own position to protect hers. It was a breathtaking, reckless gamble. Nora looked at him, this cold, closed-off man who was now fighting a dragon for her. The last of her fear melted away, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve of her own. She nodded. Okay. He squeezed her shoulders once, a silent communication of solidarity. As she turned to leave, gathering her shattered composure, he added, his voice soft yet deadly serious, Nora, be careful. She's made her first move. Now, she'll be waiting for your counter. Nora walked out of his office, her head held high, feeling the weight of his gaze on her back. She stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the image of Tai Woon already on his phone, his expression that of a general mobilizing his troops. The battle was no longer hidden on a rooftop terrace. It was out in the open. And as the elevator descended, Nora didn't know that in the security control room, a technician, paid handsomely by Seo Yun, was watching the footage of her leaving Tai Woon's office late at night, her lips still slightly swollen from a kiss. He picked up a secure line and dialed a single number. He whispered. She's leaving his office now. And she's smiling. The trap is set. The battle lines are drawn. Tai Woon has pledged to fight for Nora, but his sister has already anticipated their every move. With a spy in their midst and fabricated evidence waiting to strike, can their newfound alliance survive the corporate war that's about to erupt? The next morning, the Zenith Hotel hummed with a deceptive calm. Nora moved through her duties with a serene smile plastered on her face, but her heart was a drum against her ribs. Every glance from a colleague felt like an accusation, every camera in the ceiling a watching eye. She was following Tai Woon's command, act normal. At 10 a.m. precisely, she walked into the Human Resources Department. The head of HR, Mr. Kim, looked up with a polite, impersonal smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Bennett, how can I help you? Nora took a steadying breath, channeling every ounce of the dignity she possessed. I would like to formally file a complaint against Executive Director Seo Yun Han for workplace harassment and intimidation. Mr. Kim's smile vanished. The air in the room solidified. He slowly closed the file on his desk. That is a very serious allegation. Before he could say another word, his assistant rushed in, her face pale. Sir, Vice President Han Tai Woon is here. He insists on seeing you immediately. Tai Woon didn't wait for an invitation. He strode into the office, his presence sucking all the oxygen from the room. He was dressed in a charcoal gray suit that screamed of authority, his expression carved from ice. He didn't even glance at Nora, maintaining the charade of professional distance. Mr. Kim, Tai Woon's voice was clipped, devoid of emotion. I am here to file a formal complaint regarding a breach of corporate ethics and an attempt to sabotage my management training through the fabrication of evidence against a valued employee. He slid a slim tablet across the desk. On it was a duplicate of the email he'd received, now accompanied by a preliminary report from a private digital forensics firm he had hired overnight, pointing to the metadata inconsistencies in the evidence. 2 complaints, landing simultaneously, targeting each other. It was a nuclear option. Mr. Kim looked like a man who had just seen his career flash before his eyes. Vice President Han. Miss Bennett. This is highly unprecedented. The company policy on harassment and ethical conduct is quite clear. Tai Woon stated, his gaze finally flicking to Nora, a silent message passing between them. Hold fast. I trust you will launch a full and impartial investigation immediately. My father, the chairman, will be expecting a report. The mention of his father was the final, masterful stroke. It was no longer a squabble between siblings. It was a crisis that could tarnish the Zenith name. The news rippled through the hotel's executive floors like a shockwave. By lunch, everyone who mattered knew. The Han heirs were at war, and the battlefield was a lowly waitress. Nora returned to the lobby floor, feeling the weight of 100 stares. Whispers trailed in her wake. She filed a complaint against Seoyun Han. He defended her. Who is she, really? Her shift was a marathon of endurance. But as she helped an elderly guest with their luggage, a familiar, cold voice spoke behind her. "You're more foolish than I thought." Nora turned. Seoyun stood there, her beauty a mask for her fury. The public nature of the complaints had clearly infuriated her. "You think this little stunt makes you safe?" Seoyun hissed, low enough so only Nora could hear. "You've just made yourself a target for every executive in this building who owes me a favor. You can't smile your way out of this." Before Nora could retort, a commotion erupted at the main entrance. A group of reporters, cameras flashing, surged into the lobby, held back by flustered security. Shouted questions filled the air. Is it true the Han siblings are fighting over an employee? Is there a corruption scandal at the Zenith? We heard about fabricated evidence. Seoyun's head whipped around, her eyes wide with genuine shock. This was not her doing. The situation had escalated beyond her control. Across the lobby, Tai-woon emerged from an elevator, his face a thundercloud. His plan was to create a corporate stalemate, not a media circus. He saw Nora, pale and cornered by his sister, and the horde of reporters. His protective instincts roared to life. But as he moved to intervene, his phone rang. The screen displayed one word: father. He was forced to stop, to answer the call that would decide all their fates. He met Nora's eyes across the chaotic lobby, a silent apology in his gaze as he raised the phone to his ear. "Father," he said, his voice tight. The voice on the other end was quiet, cold, and utterly furious. "The board is convening in 1 hour. You and your sister will be here. And you will bring that employee with you." The line went dead. The chairman himself had entered the game. The walk to the boardroom was the longest of Nora's life. The hushed, opulent silence of the executive floor was more intimidating than the chaotic lobby below. Tai-woon walked slightly ahead, his spine rigid, a king marching to his own trial. Seoyun followed, her heels clicking a staccato of pure fury on the marble. The boardroom doors, heavy and dark as obsidian, swung open. The room was a semicircle of power. A dozen of the most influential people in South Korea sat at a gleaming table, their faces unreadable. And at the head sat Chairman Han. He was an older, harder version of Tai-woon, his eyes holding a lifetime of calculated decisions and cold authority. His gaze swept over his 2 children before landing, with the weight of a physical blow, on Nora. "Sit," he commanded. No one spoke. Tai-woon pulled out a chair for Nora at the foot of the table, a defiant act of chivalry in the lion's den, before taking his own seat. Seoyun sat opposite him, her mask of composure back in place. "The Zenith Group," the chairman began, his voice dangerously quiet, "is built on reputation. It is our most valuable asset. This morning, that asset was threatened by a spectacle more fitting for a daytime drama than a global empire." He turned his icy gaze to Nora. "You are Nora Bennett." It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Then she cleared her throat and spoke with more strength. "Yes, Chairman. Explain to this board why the future of my company is being jeopardized over you." Before Nora could form a word, Tai-woon leaned forward. "The fault is not hers, father. It is mine. Seoyun fabricated evidence to frame Miss Bennett for financial crimes in an attempt to sabotage my judgment. Miss Bennett and I were forced to take formal action to protect the company's integrity." Seoyun let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "My brother is confused. His judgment has been compromised by an inappropriate infatuation with a member of his staff. I discovered suspicious financial activity and was duty-bound to report it. His defense of her is merely proof of his compromised state." The board members murmured, their eyes shifting between the siblings like spectators at a tennis match. "Inappropriate how?" one board member asked, his voice sly. Seo-yun's lips curled into a venomous smile. She tapped her phone, and the large screen at the front of the room lit up. It showed grainy, black and white security footage from the previous night. It was time-stamped. It showed Nora leaving Tai-woon's private office, her hands subtly touching her lips, a soft, dazed smile on her face. A collective, sharp intake of breath filled the room. Nora felt the world drop out from under her. The intimate, stolen moment had been weaponized, twisted into something sordid. "He was comforting me," Nora said, her voice shaking but clear, cutting through the hum. She stood, her chair scraping back. All eyes turned to her. "After your daughter threatened me and tried to bribe me into resigning, I was upset. Vice President Han was acting as a decent human being, which seems to be a rare commodity in this room." The audacity of her statement stunned the room into silence. "You have no proof of that," Seo-yun spat. "Don't I?" Nora's eyes, blazing with a fire no one had seen before, locked with Seo-yun's. "You sent me a text message. From a burner phone, I'm sure. But you mentioned my mother's specific medical condition and the name of her hospital. How would you know that unless you had illegally accessed my private, confidential employee files?" A crack appeared in Seo-yun's armor. Her eyes widened a fraction. Tai-woon saw his opening. He stood, placing a digital recorder on the table. The initial forensic report on the fabricated evidence shows the digital trail leads back to a terminal registered to my sister's executive assistant. He looked directly at his father. "This is not about me. This is about a toxic, vindictive campaign that is harming an innocent employee and, by extension, this company. The question this board needs to answer is whether Zenith Group condones such tactics." The room erupted into arguments. The chairman said nothing, his stony gaze moving from his humiliated daughter to his defiant son, and finally to the waitress who stood unbroken before them all. He raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. His eyes settled on Nora. "You have caused a great deal of trouble, Miss Bennett." He paused, the fate of every person in the room hanging on his next words. "Effective immediately, you are suspended with pay, pending a full investigation." Nora's heart plummeted. It was a defeat. She had lost her dream. But then the chairman turned his gaze to his daughter. "And you, Seo-yun, are relieved of your operational duties. You will take a leave of absence until this mess is resolved." The board gasped. It was a draw, a brutal, punishing draw that left both siblings wounded. As a stunned Seo-yun was led out, shooting a look of pure murder at Nora, the chairman stood. He walked to Nora, stopping so close she could see the cold calculation in his eyes. "As for you," he said, his voice so low only she could hear, "stay away from my son. This suspension is not a punishment. It is a warning. The next one will not be so gentle." He walked out, leaving Nora standing alone in the cavernous room, the ghost of his threat echoing in the silence. She had survived the lion's den, but the cost was her position, her reputation, and a chilling promise of more danger to come. Tai-woon moved to her side, but the chasm between their worlds had never felt wider or more deadly. The world outside the Zenith Hotel had never felt so vast and empty. Suspension was a limbo, a silence filled with the echo of the chairman's threat. Nora stayed in her small apartment, the walls closing in. Her phone was a dead weight, no messages, no calls from Tai-woon. The silence was a confirmation of her deepest fear, that their love had been a beautiful, impossible dream shattered by the hard reality of his world. Meanwhile, inside the penthouse, Tai-woon was a caged tiger. His father had placed him under virtual house arrest, surrounding him with advisors who monitored his every move. Every attempt to contact Nora was blocked. The chairman's ultimatum was clear: end this foolishness, or I will ensure she never works in this country again. But the silence wasn't abandonment. It was a battle fought in the shadows. Tai-woon, using a trusted old friend as a messenger, was gathering his own evidence. He uncovered the security technician his sister had bribed. He obtained sworn statements from staff who had witnessed Seo-yun's harassment. He was building a case not just to clear Nora's name, but to prove her value. A week into the suspension, a parcel was delivered to Nora's door. No return address. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a simple, elegant navy blue dress. Pinned to it was a note in a familiar, sharp handwriting. The Grand Ballroom. 8 p.m. tonight. Wear this. Trust me. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was either a trap or a miracle. But looking at the dress, feeling the faint, lingering scent of his cologne on the note, she chose to believe in the miracle. That evening, she walked into the Zenith Hotel not as an employee, but as a guest. The staff did a double-take, whispers following her like a wake as she moved through the lobby, a vision of quiet confidence in the beautiful dress. The Grand Ballroom doors were open. The annual Zenith Gala was in full swing, a whirl of diamonds and power. And there, in the center of the room, standing alone, was Tai-Woon. He was watching the entrance, his eyes burning with an intensity that stilled the very air around him. The moment he saw her, the cold mask of the air vanished, replaced by a look of such raw, open love and relief that a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. He walked toward her, every step measured, his gaze locked on hers, ignoring everyone else. The sea of elite guests parted for him. When he finally stood before her, he didn't touch her. He simply looked at her, his soul in his eyes. "The investigation is over," he announced, his voice ringing clear in the hushed ballroom. The evidence against Nora Bennett was proven to be fabricated. Her record is cleared. Her suspension is lifted. He then turned to face the crowd, his arms subtly moving to shield Nora. "But that is not why I've asked her here tonight." He took a deep breath, his voice softening, becoming personal, meant for her but spoken to the world. "I was taught that this empire was everything. That power was the only currency that mattered. But I was empty." He looked back at Nora, his eyes shimmering. "Then I met you. You, with your impossible smile and your unwavering heart. You showed me that the greatest strength isn't in wealth, but in kindness. The truest power isn't in command, but in love." From his pocket, he pulled out not a ring, but a small, old-fashioned key. He held it out to her. "This is the key to the hotel's old rooftop garden. It's where I go to remember that there is a world beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. It's my sanctuary, and I want to share it with you. Not as my employee, not as a secret, but as my partner." He was choosing her. Publicly, defiantly, romantically. Just like in their K-drama inspiration, he was declaring his love against all odds, proving that her world had enriched his far more than his could ever enrich hers. From the sidelines, his father watched, his face unreadable. But as he saw the unwavering conviction in his son's eyes and the genuine, tearful joy on Nora's face, the chairman gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He saw not a weakness, but a new kind of strength. As the guests broke into hesitant but genuine applause, Tai-Woon finally took Nora's hand. He led her not onto a dance floor, but out of the ballroom, toward the elevators, toward their future. On the rooftop garden, under a canopy of stars and fairy lights, he finally took her in his arms. "I love you, Nora Bennett," he whispered against her lips. "I love you, Tai-Woon Han," she whispered back, her smile brighter than all the lights of Seoul below. Their kiss was not a secret, not a scandal, but a promise. A promise of street food dates and boardroom victories, of facing his family together, and of building a life where his world and hers could beautifully, finally, become one. And so, the cold air and the waitress with the warm heart found their true refuge, not in a hotel or an empire, but in each other's arms, ready to write their own happy ever after, one genuine smile at a time. Would you risk it all for a love that defies every rule? Let us know your answer with a like, share this with a fellow dreamer, and subscribe for more breathtaking stories of power and passion.